All right, first grade. Today we are going to continue talking about Tomas and the library lady and continuing to talk about what are called the story elements. And the story elements are what we've talked about two of them, which, if you remember using our story stones, does anybody remember what story stone, what this stands for? Characters, that's right. Excellent. The characters, who the story is about, who is in the story. And we said on Friday, or on Thursday rather, that the characters could be people, it could be animals. It's just who the story is about. And then we also talked about this story element or part, story part. And it is that's right, setting. And the setting can be both where and when a story takes place, right? And we focused more on the where. So today we are going to talk about two other elements. Okay, this story stone with the X on it stands for the problem. And the problem in a story is just like what you probably think of a problem in real life, right? A problem is something that is causing the person, the character, you, some sort of trouble, or something isn't working the way you want it to, or the character wants it to, and it's causing trouble. And that is the problem in a story. And then this story stone, this story element, is what we call the resolution. And the resolution is how the story, or rather, how the problem is solved in the story. Okay, so today we're going to take a little bit closer look at Tomas and the library lady and try to find the problem and the resolution. And before we jump into that, just a quick reminder about our pizza questions. Our big pizza question is, how do books change life for people around the world? We're not quite ready to answer that yet. We have a few more books to read to help us answer that question. And we're not quite ready to answer how books change life for Tomas, but by the end of the week, we will be able to answer that. We're still working on that one bite of pizza question of what is happening in Tomas and the library lady. And by paying attention to and noticing these story stones or the story elements, it helps us to answer that question and to understand and know what is happening in the story. All right, so we are going to go back into the text and we're not going to reread it, but we want to go and look and see if we can figure out what the problem is in Tomas. Okay, so sometimes stories can have more than one problem, or there can be little problems along the way, but we want to look for what the big problem, the big kind of overall problem is in this text. So we're not going to reread, but just kind of flip through and remind ourselves of what's happening. So here Tomas is in the car. They're going to Iowa. He's hot and tired. I mean, that's something that's causing him trouble at the moment, but that's not really the big overall problem of the story. You know, he can get a drink, he's going to get some rest, and that will kind of take care of that. So that's not really the big main problem. Here he's, he's resting, they're continuing their journey. Here he's playing with his brother. And then we get to this part. And if you remember, Papa Grande is telling a story, and Tomas is able to jump in and finish the ending of the story. And at the bottom here, it says, Papa Grande laughed. Tomas, you know all my stories. So I'm thinking and thinking about what happens in the story, the rest of the story, and what it's called. I'm thinking that this is really the problem, right? That he knows all of Papa Grande's stories. So we're going to go back and update our story map with this problem. All right, so here we are back at our story map. We see the characters that we talked about last week, and Tomas being the main character. We also see the setting that we talked about last week. all the different places that the story took place. And our problem, Tomas knows all of Papa Grande's stories. Okay, very good. Now, once we figure out what the problem is, the next step is to think about how do the characters try to solve the problem, right? Normally, and in life as well, it's not as though there's a problem and then, like, kind of poof, all of a sudden, it's not a problem anymore. I mean, very rarely. Sometimes that might happen, but most of the time, in order for a problem to get solved, somebody has to do something or something has to happen. So let's look back in the story to see if we can figure out what are the steps that the character or characters take to solve the problem. Like I said, it doesn't just, just like in real life, problems don't just go from being a problem and then all of a sudden, whoop, it's not a problem anymore. Most of the time. I'm sure there's some exceptions. I'm sure it's nice when it works out that way. But most of the time, we have to do something to try to solve the problem. So let's check the book. Okay, so here we are back in the book, and let's see what happens. So next, Tomas goes to the library, and when he's at the library, he gets new books that have a whole bunch of new stories, right? So he goes to the library, he works with the library lady. Let's go back and write about how he takes these steps to change the problem and solve the problem. Okay, so Tomas, Tomas goes to the library and reads new books. So now that's something that he has done to help solve this problem of knowing all of the stories that Papa Grande tells. Now he has new stories that he knows. Okay, now the last part, and I guess you could say the best part because it's solving the problem, is the resolution. So let's look for the resolution. Okay, so whenever you're trying to figure out what the resolution is, you always want to keep the problem in mind. The problem was that he knew all of Papa Grande's stories. Papa Grande had been the family storyteller, and Tomas knew them all. So when I read this part here, it says, more stories for the new storyteller. It makes me think, okay, I bet this is the resolution, right? Tomas is now the storyteller. He took the steps to get all the books and read the new stories, and now he can be the one to tell the stories to his family instead of Papa Grande, since he already knows all of the stories that Papa Grande knows. So let's go update our story map, and then I'll let you know what your activity, your assignment will be for this. All right, so our resolution, or how the story is solved, is that Tomas is the new storyteller. And that has solved the problem of already knowing all of Papa Grande's stories. All right, excellent. So now we have our completed story map, and we can retell the story using these elements. So let me show you just a little helpful trick to help you remember. You have your hand, right? And it's normally with us all the time. So we can use this to help us remember the different elements or the story stones or the parts of the story. And can help us retell, right? We can start by, telling who the characters are in the story. We can tell where the story took place or the setting. We talk about the problem. And then importantly, we talk about the changes or the steps the character or characters took to solve the problem. And then we have the resolution. So thinking and telling about those 5 things help you to retell a story. Okay, so what you're going to do now in your seesaw activities, this will come out with your seesaw activities, but you'll actually need to grab your blue Wit and Wisdom workbook. And We're coming to the end of the of reading the Tomas, and we're going to be moving on to a new story. And so, whenever we do that, we have what's called a focusing question task. And I don't want to call it a test per se, but it's sort of like a wrap up to kind of wrap up everything that we learned in the last few lessons. And for your focusing question task, you're going to be retelling the story of Tomas using the story elements that we've been talking about. So on page 4 or handout 4A in your Wit and Wisdom workbook, you will see this on that paper. And what I would like you to do is just draw and write. So using words, using pictures, retell the story, Tomas and the Library Lady. Now, I know on this paper there aren't like very nice boxes or lines to draw in. So you just want to do the best that you can. If you just kind of like here, we're not writing in complete sentences necessarily. If you want to list the characters here, etc. If you want to name one of the settings or a couple of the settings, if you want to draw a picture to help show and help remind you, this is this is kind of like meant to be a preparation for our focusing task that I'll tell you about later on this week. So this is just kind of to get your ideas all together and to get all of the elements down on a paper in whatever, however makes sense to you, words, pictures, a combination of both. And what you can do when you're working on this is feel free to come back to this story map, and you can pause the video here and use this story map to help you as you're filling out this handout. Okay? And again, this is just to kind of help you prepare for that eventual focusing task where you will be retelling the story. And don't worry, we'll go over it all together and I'll help you. But this is meant to kind of help get your ideas down and be ready to do the next step. So I'll leave it on this slide so that if you want to stop and pause the video, take out your workbook so that you can, write and draw the story elements to Tomas. Okay? All right. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know as always. And I can't wait to see your story map ideas. All right. Talk with you soon.